How do you get started in Ara History Untold? Here are a few tips to help you take your first turns, to decide what to build, and how to prioritise your research at the start of this exciting new game. Make sure you let me know your starting tips down in the comments. Before you do anything in a game of Ara, you will notice just how stunning the map is, particularly in the early game. And you'll also notice that the map is crafted into beautiful regions which all provide your civilization with base yields. These yields being food, wealth, timber and material. Crucially, production is not its own yield in this game like it is in Civ. When your population grows, you'll get a chance to claim an adjacent territory and see the yields for that territory. It's a sensible approach to prioritise claiming regions in the early game which are rich in the yields that you need most and are lacking, especially if it's food that you need more of. It's also a good idea to claim regions which include resources. These can be used to craft items and grow your empire. As a bonus tip, I like to enable yield icons on the map that I can understand the quality of land around my city and better plan my expansion direction. These can be turned on via the toggle visualization options in the bottom right corner. The first actual action you'll take in Ara is not to settle your capital, as this is done automatically before you start the game, which to some players that have just played games like Civ might find a bit weird. No, the first action is to move your scout. This first scout is a really valuable resource and should be used to explore. You can set your scout to auto-explore to find all the nearby catchers, Ara's version of goodie huts, see what tribes and civilizations are near you, and to discover hostile wildlife in nearby regions. Some of this wildlife can be quite tough to kill and has the potential to cause your scout some serious damage, so be wary of every predator's danger level, 5 being the most dangerous, and the number of hunts that will be required to remove them, especially if your scout is already hurt. Obviously, despite being friend-shaped, polar bears are in fact dangerous. Dangerous wildlife will need to be cleared before you can build in a region though, and the resources you attain from removing them are well worth gathering for things like crafting. Make the most of your first scout and consider building a second one in your first few turns to further your ability to explore early on. Since I just mentioned them, catchers, well I think that's how you pronounce it anyway, are really useful in the early game. So these are dotted around the map and when looted by your scouts give a variation of resources that will help set your empire up for success. You can get most of the game's main yields, you can get tools, and you can also get resources to craft with and more from them, so make sure you loot as many as possible. Better you have them and these bonuses than your rivals. I've been having quite a lot of success training a second scout as my first build and then frantically searching the map to pick up as many of these as possible, so you could always consider trying out that strategy. Whilst exploring with your scout, it's worth knowing that a key gameplay feature of Ara is its truly simultaneous turns. This means that all the moves and actions of all players are completed at the same time at the end of the turn. Therefore, when you move your unit on the map, what you're actually seeing is a planned move rather than a completed one, meaning you can, well, undo it and direct your unit elsewhere before completing the turn. This is a really helpful tip to remember because if you make a misclick or just change your mind, as long as it's before you've ended the turn, you can change your orders. Perhaps the biggest feature of Ara is crafting and the crafting system, and you'll want to make sure your first experience of it comes pretty soon by building a workshop as one of your first builds and really putting some time into understanding the basics. Using your materials, the items available to build in your workshop are central to improving the yield outputs of other buildings. For an example, a farm is one of the earliest projects available to construct in the game. It gives bonus food to your empire and bonus growth to the city it is situated in. However, if you add a plough to its supplies, which you can craft at the workshop, it will give a further small boost to the farm's food yields. The goods that you can craft at your workshop are also necessary to construct certain buildings in the early game, plus lots more. So if you want to maybe construct the Triumph Stonehenge for example, you're going to need 5 lithic tools and 10 rope, all of which can be crafted at your workshop. It's worth noting that when you first start crafting things, things seem to take, well, forever basically, and this is definitely something I ran into. Now the way around this is by spending resources like wealth and materials to speed up production, and you will definitely need to do this. If your workshop has a base production of 14, then you can imagine that it's worth spending 5 gold per turn to add a further 50 production to that. I would really recommend building a workshop early on to help you get the basics of Ara's crafting system. Another of your very first actions in Ara is choosing which technologies to research. Techs work a little bit differently in Ara. Each of the game's 12 eras has a unique set of technologies available to research, but something that was quite strange for me as a Civ player is that you can end up progressing to the next era before you research every one of your current era's techs. Instead, in Ara, once you've researched the era catalyst tech, for the ancient era that would be bronze working, you'll leave behind all the techs from that era that you've not yet researched. When starting out in the game, I would recommend taking your time in the ancient era and not skipping any of the techs. Even though some of their features can be unlocked in a tech in a later era, it's best to know what you need for your playstyle before you start cutting corners. Obviously, as you get more familiar with the game, you'll know which techs you don't need, and therefore which you're happy to skip. So, what should you prioritise researching in your first few turns? I always make sure I grab grain storage early on, as I find it really helps improve the productivity of my farms, giving my empire the food it needs to grow. Aside from that, a lot is actually dependent on what resources start near me, and what techs I need to make the most of them. If I start near grapes and want to craft wine, I'll grab the fermenting tech. If I want to go for the early game try on Stonehenge for a major boost to prestige, then I might go for rope making to unlock it. Maybe a meta strategy will emerge in the future, well I'm sure it will, but in these early stages all of that is yet to come, so I'd recommend for new players just to have a play about, think about what resources are nearby, and go from there. Hopefully you are enjoying Ara so far. I will be sharing more advanced tips along with my thoughts, both good and bad, regarding the release of the game in the near future, so watch out for that. For more content like this, feel free to watch the video on screen now. Thank you for watching this video, and I'll catch you soon.